radio enthusiasts. Welcome to another video about early radio from the Roaring Twenties Antique Radio Museum. In this video, we present the second in a series of videos on the people who made a major impact on early radio in the 1920s. Of all the radio manufacturers of the 1920s, no one made a bigger impact on radio than Arthur Atwater Kent. Mr. Kent preferred to go by his middle name Atwater, so we will continue to honor his wishes in this video. On December 3, 1873, Prentice and Elizabeth Atwater received an early Christmas present, the birth of their son, Arthur Atwater Kent. They had lost their first two sons, Osborne and Harry, in their infancy. It's not hard to imagine how much this early Christmas gift meant to them. 8 years later, the family moved to Worcester, Massachusetts. As a boy, Atwater showed an affinity for mechanical and electrical work by his tinkering with electric motors, a trait he likely inherited from his father, Prentice, a doctor by profession who enjoyed carpentry. Years later, as a young adult, Atwater enrolled in the Worcester Polytechnic Institute in 1895. He quickly became bored with the school's slow pace of learning and left after 1 year to start his own company, the Kent Electric Manufacturing Company. He purchased a one-room building located on Herman Street in Worcester. He would design and build his own electric motors and fans. Atwater would also get to work with his father at his new company. In August of 1896, Atwater's mother Elizabeth passed away. Knowing how much his mother wanted him to get an education, he returned to the Worcester Polytechnic Institute, only to leave again in 1897. Decades later, he would serve on the Institute's board of directors from 1926 to 1931. 4 years after leaving school for the second time, in 1901, Atwater Kent would sell his company. After working for the new owners for a short time, he decided he did not enjoy having a boss and left the company. In 1902, Atwater would open his second company, Atwater Kent Manufacturing Works, at the North 6th Street in Philadelphia. It was there where he began making automotive parts for the automobile industry. In 1905, Atwater Kent invented the Unisparker ignition system, which later became commonly referred to as the cap and rotor ignition system. It would be his first, but not his last or biggest claim to fame. He licensed his invention to all the major automotive companies, supplying him with a steady stream of income for years to come. His invention was used by the automotive companies until the 1970s. Things kept rolling along for Atwater, and in 1906 he was wedded to Mabel Lucas, whose family was a member of Philadelphia Society. Kent Manufacturing continued to grow with the success of the Unisparker. By 1910, his business had roughly 100 employees, and Atwater was planning a move into a larger facility for his growing company. Atwater Kent's string of good fortune was broken in 1919 when his father Prentice died of cancer in May of that year. The United States entered World War I 2 years before his father's death. The United States Army had chosen Atwater Kent Manufacturing Company to make several precision instruments for the war effort. However, after the war, business was slow, but Atwater had amassed a fortune. He thought about retiring, but he recognized what he thought would be a huge business opportunity: radio. His fortune gave him the ability to start a new business and finance it by himself. At first, he would manufacture radio components, and by 1922, he was building and selling complete radios, beginning with the Model 3925, more commonly referred to as the Model 1. Production began on November 11, 1922. The Model 1 consisted of a coupled circuit tuner and a detector amplifier on a mahogany board. The company referred to them as open sets. Over time, they became more commonly known as breadboard radios. Between 1922 and 1924, Atwater Kent would build many versions of his breadboard radios, constantly improving them by adding more components and tubes. The Model 1 was 18.5 inches long. The last breadboard, the Model 12B, was 34 inches long, almost twice the size of the Model 1. The breadboard radios were a unique design and considered by many to be among the most unique and attractive radios ever built. Today, over a century later, they are still prized by radio collectors. By 1925, Atwater Kent Manufacturing Company would become the largest radio manufacturer in the world. Atwater's keen business sense and the high standards he set for the radios his company produced had paid off. As business grew, Atwater's company had outgrown its factory. Atwater purchased 20 acres of land on Wissahickon Avenue in Philadelphia and built an 11-acre manufacturing facility. Later, he would buy more land adjacent to his and increase the size of his manufacturing complex to an astonishing 32 acres. You could get some decent exercise just walking the 1.5-mile walk around the building. By 1926, Atwater Kent Manufacturing had built its 1 millionth radio. It would take only 2 years for the company to surpass 2 million radios. In 1927, electric radios first went on sale to the public. Atwater Kent brought out the Model 37, and it became the best-selling radio on the market. Atwater Kent Manufacturing continued to grow, and by 1929 had 8,500 employees, churning out over 1 million radio sets a year. By 1931, the company had 12,000 employees and was building 2 million radios a year. Eventually, the stock market crash caught up with the Atwater Kent Manufacturing Company, and by 1934, they had laid off most of their workers. The unions were pressuring the company, and television was on the horizon. In 1936, Atwater had had enough. Closing in on 60 years old, he decided to close his company. It was quite a shock to the radio world that the largest manufacturer of radios in the 1920s and early 30s was shutting down for good. With all this going on, Atwater Kent was also dealing with the end of his marriage. His wife Mabel was divorcing him, most likely for infidelity. They never were officially divorced, just legally separated. After a couple of years of tying up his business interests, Atwater bought a mansion in California and started living the high life, throwing lavish parties and hobnobbing with the rich and famous. In Kirk Douglas's autobiography, A Ragpicker's Son, Kirk Douglas mentioned a party he was invited to when he was just starting out in Hollywood. He was still an unknown actor and had found a pretty young starlet to go with him to the party. While at the party, Jimmy Stewart, Henry Fonda, and Henry's wife came up to Kirk and his date and chatted a while. After a bit, the three moved on and Kirk's date went to the powder room. After waiting quite a while for his date to come back, he realized his date had slipped out of the party with Jimmy Stewart. The party's host was Atwater Kent. Finally, on March 4th, 1949, Atwater Kent died from cancer. He had given generously to the arts and education during his life and did so again in death, leaving large bequests to those same causes. He also left $2 million to the wife that he was separated from a decade earlier, and also bequests to each of his children. He was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Cemetery in Los Angeles. There's much more to Atwater Kent's life than we covered in this video. The life he led was that of a kind and generous man. Though he had his flaws, he led a remarkable life. Some say he was just a good businessman, but he was far more than that. When he died, he held 93 patents on his inventions. Those inventions made him rich, and fortunately for all radio enthusiasts, gave him the resources to start a radio company. A century later, his creations are still cherished by many, and 75 years after his death, the mark he made in radio is still deeply embedded in its history. That's it for this video. There will be more to come as we continue to investigate the early history of the world's first mass medium, radio. Thanks for watching.